This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
Just a box of fluffy ducks.
Well, we're excited you're with us today. It's going to be a glorious show. Man, I love these old profile shows. And today we've got a super old school one that most of our listeners, myself included, grew up on, the Honky Tonk Man. Pretty excited to talk about Honky, man. This is going to be a good show.
Well, he's just a honky tonk man. He's cool. He's cocky. He's bad.
Roy Wayne Ferris was born January 25th, 1953, right there in Tennessee. He has one son, Roy, and a daughter, Megan, as opposed to Megan, who has her doctorate in veterinary medicine. Who would have thought, man? Honky Tonk Man cranking out some pretty smart youngins.
Well, you know, the honky tonk man's a pretty smart fella himself.
Yes, he is. We're going to get into that today. Ferris himself grew up on a small cotton farm about 60 miles outside of Memphis. And then around 11 years old, he started watching the only wrestling he could pick up on TV, Nick Goulas's Nashville territory. Let's talk about Nashville for a minute. I think a lot of our listeners probably confuse Nashville and Memphis and just assume Tennessee was one territory, but that's not exactly the case, right, Bruce?
Well, Tennessee is Tennessee, and there was the Welsh group, and Goulas and those guys kind of did East Tennessee, and that's where them Fuller boys come from. And then over in the west end of Tennessee, that'd be Memphis. And I guess we'll go ahead and call Nashville a little bit of, well, Nashville's not really, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, Nick Goulas was the promoter there for years. Nick was an old time wrestling promoter that was the epitome of that just old school con wrestling promoter. I believe he actually did smoke a big old cigar, and he had a son by the name of George Goulas. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because the first time that I met George Goulas, his son, George traveled to Houston to deliver an NWA sign to Paul Bosch. Just literally, that's what it was, man. Was a big sign that had the NWA logo on it. And with George Goulas was, Jimmy Kirklees, I believe was his name. Jimmy Kirklees was like the businessman and kind of the guy that did a lot of work there for old Nick Goulas and shit. So he was there. George Goulas was there. And that night, a young man worked for the first time in Houston, Texas, by the name of Bobby Eaton.
Wow.
And Bobby and George were a tag team in Tennessee known as the Jet Set. And George was not a very good worker. Okay? George was the drizzling shits. But George wanted to be a wrestler. Daddy wanted him to be a wrestler. And they would, Nick would put George in the main event, and it was a very nepotistic type situation there in Nashville, Tennessee. But then Nick learned to put George with guys that could work, like a la Bobby Eaton, young, good-looking guy, and it was the Jet Set. They were setting Tennessee on fire, and they wanted old Bobby to come on down to Houston, Texas, and maybe shoot something with Bobby in Texas and just get some exposure for Bobby around the country. And then next time I saw Bobby Eaton was when he came in as part of the Midnight Express. Motherfucker.
So Honky says he always wanted to be in entertainment, and he's often said this in his shoot interviews, but growing up, he played a lot of sports. He played baseball, basketball, and football, but there was no amateur wrestling at his high school. And he scored a whopping 15 on his ACT, gets into health and physical education in college. And that leads Ferris to coaching high school football for 2 years at Munford High School in Munford, Tennessee. Bruce, this guy could have been the original Dean Douglas. Well, I mean, he could have been a teacher gimmick. I mean, of all the things that I could see And listen, some of this is probably from watching too much HBO, but I could totally see the Honky Tonk Man as a PE coach. Like, to me, he could have been like the original Kenny Powers.
Actually, that is kind of where I was going. I could see old Wayne there. Coach Ferris, God damn it, son, get over there and give it 10 more side straddle hops on 2. Here you go. Count them out. He got the long sideburns and the hair slicked back, coming to your town in a pink Cadillac. It's just rock and roll Wayne Ferris, basketball coach.
Or football, whatever.
Or football, whatever. Doesn't really fucking matter.
No, listen, the first time I took you to an Alabama game, when we scored a touchdown, you yelled home run. So
yeah. Yay!
Of course.
And then they hit that 3-pointer from outside.
They did.
I love it when they hit the goalie and the puck gets stuck in his mask there at the Alabama football games.
It's the best, man. Isn't it fun to think now that you're an indentured servant that you'll never get to go another game with me? Every Saturday.
I still got to take Kane to an Alabama football game.
Listen, just send him. Me and him will go. We'll have a great night this year. But next year, well, hell, you might be fired then. Ferris had both friends and family in wrestling. Of course, Jerry Lawler's mother was Ferris's mother's sister. That tickles you, doesn't it? That Jerry Lawler.
It tickles me, the whole thing in Tennessee, and how everybody was related to somebody. They were either somebody's cousin or mother or sister, or just, yeah, that just tickles me. But yes, they're cousins, old Wayne Ferris and Jerry the Kink Lawler.
Jerry the Kink Lawler. How about that? I got to tell you, the irony is not lost on me of you saying, oh, everybody's related. So anyway, my brother, Dr. Tom, come on, man.
What?
I'm just saying, you're part of a wrestling family yourself.
Yeah, but we're not like fucking our cousins.
Well, they weren't either.
I think they were.
Well, I mean, so you guys were fucking your moms? Because that's what y'all have in common.
No.
Why would you accuse Dr. Tom? He's a fine, upstanding citizen. And by God, I won't let you talk about, I would take a bullet for him.
Dr. John Richards.
Well, believe it or not, before Honky made his way to the WWF, he even spent some time in Puerto Rico for WWC, easy for me to say. He said every night you had to fight your way into and out of the arena. And this has become legendary, Bruce. We know that some fans would even throw rocks and some would throw battery acid, just crazy stuff. He wound up spending 10 months there, working 3 or 4 days a week. What was the rap on Puerto Rico in the late 80s or late 70s and early 80s?
Well, actually, it was a good place to go to make some good money. The local, with Carlos and Jovica and those guys, they were legends on the island and able to talk people into the buildings, and they would bring in Americans, heels, to be their foes. And it was a pretty simple formula that worked for them for many, 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 many years. So if you could go over there and get over as a heel and stay, chances are you'd make some good money. The top guys, like the Briscoes and the Funks, Flair and stuff like that, they loved going to Puerto Rico because it was always a good payday, easy trips, and you're out on the beach having a good time.
There are worse things. Believe it or not, Honky does actually spend a little bit of time in Mid-Atlantic. I think he's there for just a hiccup, and then he goes to Japan for 6 weeks for Giant Baba, and even wrestles Jack Briscoe over there during his stint. And he says that Jack was the ultimate professional. He would also say that he made like $1,000 a week in Japan, but that he was promised $1,200 by Abdullah the Butcher. Japan has always been the big money thing, especially in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Am I right?
Yeah. If you're working a territory and you get if you get one tour a year, that's pretty good because you had guaranteed money. It wasn't, you weren't getting paid off of houses. You went over there for a set amount of money per week. You knew how many dates you were going to be there, and they paid for your transportation. They would get you in between the towns on the buses and what have you. So it was a pretty good gig if you wanted to go there three 3 weeks, 3-week tour, 5-week tour, 6-week tour, whatever. Yeah, shit, go make some money. And when the two companies, when All Japan and New Japan, when they made the split between Inoki and Baba, and they each had their own individual companies, those prices went up. So guys could go over there and make a lot more money because they just say, hey, I'm going to go work for the other company.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.